Welcome back to our channel. Ashley froze, the world around her folding into a quiet, suffocating void the moment she laid eyes on the DNA test results. The sterile white paper, inked with black letters, carried a weight far beyond its physical presence. Each word struck her like a hammer against her ribs. Joey, her father. Her father. The repetition was unnecessary. The truth had already pierced her consciousness with the precision of a scalpel, cutting through years of constructed reality. The sterile walls of the laboratory seemed to close in, fluorescent lights flickering as if echoing the tremors coursing through her chest. Every breath felt stolen, each heartbeat an echo that reverberated in her ears with the cruel insistence of inevitability. For a long moment, she could do nothing but stare at the paper, as though memorizing the cold facts could somehow make them less devastating. Her mind churned, attempting to reconcile a lifetime of fragmented memories with this newly revealed reality. Joey, the man she had seen only as a distant figure in her life, now emerged as an omnipotent shadow of paternal authority, shaping her existence in ways she had never imagined. The familiar warmth she had associated with the small moments of his presence, visits that had always felt cautious, restrained, was suddenly tinged with deception. Every interaction, every gesture now seemed to carry a hidden weight, an unspoken narrative of withheld truth. Anger surged first, sharp and immediate, like ice water poured into her veins. The sheer audacity of Joey's silence, the years spent withholding such a fundamental truth, ignited a primal fury within her. She wanted to scream, to rip the paper into pieces, to confront him with the raw force of her discovery, yet even as this instinct flared, fear coiled tightly around her spine. Fear of the consequences, fear of the truth itself, and fear of what such confrontation might unleash. Her body trembled, muscles taut, fists clenching until her knuckles turned white. She felt as though the very air in the room had thickened, trapping her in a moment that stretched into eternity. Confusion followed swiftly, bleeding into the anger like dark water into fire. Her memories became a labyrinth of contradictions. Images of Joey's restrained affection now tainted with suspicion, his protective gestures now ambiguous, charged with a secrecy she had never anticipated. Had he loved her? Had he intended to protect her from something darker, or had he merely prioritized his own convenience, maintaining control through omission? Each possibility twisted her gut, a gnawing anxiety that seemed to grow with every heartbeat. The room around her seemed to warp under the weight of her emotions. Objects she had passed countless times before, the sink, the counter, the scattered medical pamphlets, took on unfamiliar significance, becoming symbols of her displacement in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. Even the faint hum of the laboratory equipment sounded accusatory, a relentless reminder of how thin the veneer of normalcy had always been. She realized, with a sinking horror, that nothing about her life could ever return to its previous state. The past had been rewritten without her consent, and she was left to navigate the ruins. Her gaze involuntarily shifted to the corner where her purse lay, the place she had absent-mindedly set the envelope containing the test results. The paper inside felt heavier than any object she had ever held. She imagined tossing it into the trash, burying the truth in the mundane routines of life, yet she knew such an action would not erase the cognitive quake within her. The knowledge was indelible. It had planted a seed of disillusionment that would grow, unchecked, until it consumed every comforting certainty she had ever relied upon. Joey's image intruded upon her mind unbidden, a composite of past moments reframed in the light of betrayal. She remembered his cautious smiles, his restrained touches, the guarded tone he had always taken in their interactions. Those gestures, once reassuring, now seemed deliberate, almost manipulative. He had curated their relationship, crafting it to maintain his secrets, and the realization sparked an intense, almost physical recoil. Ashley felt as if every nerve ending had been electrified by the magnitude of his omission. The trust she had naively invested in him now felt like a wound, raw and bleeding, impossible to soothe. Her internal storm churned violently. Waves of anger, hurt, disbelief, and confusion collided, creating a maelstrom that threatened to swallow reason entirely. Every emotion amplified the others, feeding a cycle of destructive thought that offered no relief. Her hands shook, her vision narrowed, and for a fleeting moment she feared losing control entirely, of herself, of her response, of the fragile stability of her emotional equilibrium. The revelation was a cage, each iron bar forged from layers of deception and time, and she was trapped within, forced to confront not only Joey's betrayal but also her own vulnerability in the face of such fundamental truths. Ashley's thoughts turned to the implications beyond personal feelings. How many decisions in her life had been shaped by the absence of this knowledge? How many relationships, choices, and sacrifices had been guided by a framework built upon a lie? The enormity of the situation weighed down upon her consciousness. Every strategy she had developed for navigating the treacherous waters of adulthood now seemed naive, predicated on incomplete information. She felt blindsided not only by Joey but by the very architecture of her existence. Physical sensations mirrored her psychological turmoil. Her stomach churned, a sickening blend of nausea and adrenaline. Her limbs felt leaden, yet jittery, as though part of her wanted to flee while another part demanded immediate confrontation. The dichotomy of impulses, flight versus fight, rage versus reason, was paralyzing. Each heartbeat seemed to pulse with the drum of unspoken consequences, each breath a reminder of the precarious balance between clarity and chaos. The storm outside mirrored the one within her mind. Rain battered the windows of her apartment with relentless ferocity, a rhythm of nature that echoed the pulse of her anxiety. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and menacing, punctuating the silence in a manner that seemed almost orchestrated, as if the universe itself were reflecting the gravity of her discovery. Lightning illuminated the room intermittently, casting long, shifting shadows that made every surface appear foreign and threatening. The external turbulence mirrored the internal. Both forces left her suspended in a liminal space where nothing seemed certain, and every decision was fraught with peril. She considered Joey again, imagining the moment she would confront him, or perhaps the moment he would confront her. The mental rehearsal of potential encounters only intensified the chaos within. Would she demand explanations? Would she seek revenge? Or would she retreat, letting the revelation fester silently, a corrosive force reshaping her perception of the man she had once thought she knew? Every scenario carried potential catastrophe, and the multiplicity of outcomes left her paralyzed with anticipation. Ashley's anger, once raw and immediate, began to evolve into a more insidious form of cognitive dissonance. She acknowledged, with reluctant clarity, that part of her still longed for connection, for the paternal bond she had been denied, even as she despised the manner in which it had been withheld. The duality was suffocating, love and hatred, dependency and disdain, vulnerability and rage, intertwined in a psychological knot that resisted resolution. Each memory of Joey now carried multiple interpretations, layered with duplicity and possibility, and she could no longer trust her instincts to guide her safely through them. Her isolation became palpable. The knowledge of her parentage had rendered every prior relationship, every social expectation, every assumption about family, fragile and suspect. The betrayal extended beyond Joey, it reached into the very fabric of her identity. She felt exposed, stripped of certainty, and acutely aware of how vulnerable she was to manipulation, circumstance, and the unpredictable nature of human behavior. The room, silent but for the storm, became a crucible of reflection, forcing her to confront the consequences of truths long hidden. Time seemed to dilate. Minutes stretched into eternities as Ashley cycled through despair, fury, and cautious analysis. She recognized the necessity of strategic thinking even as emotion threatened to overwhelm. The revelation demanded decisions, but each choice carried risk, of confrontation, of estrangement, of irrevocable damage to her emotional well-being. The pressure was almost unbearable, it bent the edges of perception and forced a focus on immediate reality, isolating her from comforting abstractions and naive assumptions. The physical environment reinforced her inner turmoil. Rain sluiced down the windows in blinding sheets, wind rattled the panes, and occasional gusts sent shudders through the apartment structure. Each sound, each sudden movement of shadow and light, heightened her senses to a painful acuity. She felt the world contracting, collapsing into the space of the kitchen, the bedroom, the hallways she had walked countless times. Each familiar corner now seemed charged with potential danger, each object a reminder of fragile control and hidden truths. Ashley's resolve began to harden, forged in the twin fires of betrayal and necessity. She recognized that inaction was not a refuge, it was an invitation to further manipulation, a passive complicity in the shaping of her own fate by someone who had kept vital truths from her. She felt the raw pull of survival instincts, a combination of emotional self-preservation and the desire for justice, beginning to coalesce into actionable clarity. Yet even this newfound focus carried the weight of moral complexity, the realization that choices made under duress could have unforeseen consequences, not only for herself but for those around her. The storm outside and the storm within Ashley were now inseparable, each amplifying the other. Lightning illuminated fleeting aspects of her room and her own reflection, revealing a face etched with tension, eyes wide and bright with emotional overload, and hands trembling with the effort of containment. The revelation of Joey's identity had transformed her world into a battleground where every emotional response, every thought, every instinct, carried immediate and significant weight. Survival, understanding, and retribution were intertwined, each demanding attention, each threatening collapse.